Hello everyone, my name is Miguel Greenberg. In this video, I would like to introduce my React mega tutorial to you. This is a course that takes you from zero to a complete application built with the React library. You can see here the final version of this application. It has a sidebar with some options, different pages. You can do pagination for long lists of items. It has an account drop down, profile pages, editing, forms, security related options. So it's basically a fairly complete application that has all the features that are transferable very likely to your own project. So what I would like to do to help you decide if this is a course that will work for you is to go chapter by chapter and describe what you will be learning. Okay, so chapter 1 is an introductory chapter that shows you how to work with modern JavaScript. My experience when talking with JavaScript developers is that many are not familiar with the features that were added to the language in recent years. So I think it's important so that you are not confused later on to be aware of all these things. And chapter 1 is dedicated to filling any gaps that you may have in your knowledge of modern JavaScript. Now, starting with chapter 2, we begin on the road to develop a complete project. So in chapter 2, you are going to create a brand new React project, and you are going to learn how to render simple things to the page. You can see here, this is the way the application looks at the end of chapter 2. So there's a very humble attempt at rendering a title and a couple of posts, which, by the way, the posts are made up. They're not coming from a server at this time. These are made up, and they're used as a vehicle to help you learn how to render data to the page. So all of these very basic things are going to be covered in chapter 2 without paying much attention, as you can see, to how the application looks. At this point, that is not important. And the main thing is to learn how to render contents. So moving on to chapter 3, here you are going to spend a lot more time with components. So you are going to start using user interface components. This course uses the Bootstrap library for user interface components, and you can see here that the header is now using a much nicer style that comes from this library, from Bootstrap. And there's also a humble attempt at a sidebar that is at this point is incomplete. It's the first attempt that will be improved later in the course. But anyway, you can see that there's a header, there's a sidebar, and there's a content area where the blog posts are rendered. In terms of React topics, here you are going to learn how to work with third-party components and also how to create your own components, because now this page is not a single file anymore. You're going to create a component for the sidebar, a component for the header, and a component for the list of posts. Then when we get to chapter 4, the topic is page routing and navigation. So this uses the React router package, which extends React with a very nice and complete page navigation system that is actually quite similar to the browsers, the one that the browser uses with traditional applications that are rendered in the server. So here you will be able to use this sidebar, which now has working links, and switch between pages. You can see that this explore page is it's a placeholder at this point, but nonetheless you can switch between the two. The history, with the back button and forward works too. And also, just for fun, in this chapter you will build also a placeholder for what's going to be the login page later on. So let's go back to feed, and now let's move on to chapter 5. And in chapter 5 we are going to learn about the backend. So you are going to learn how to make a request to a backend service, get the data, and then put the data on the page. So you can see that here the couple of posts that were made up were now replaced by posts that, to be honest, they also look made up because the server generates randomized blog posts and usernames. But these are coming from the backend. So you will learn how to render an image, how to render the username as a link. When you click on the link, it goes to a user page, a page for this user that is still a placeholder, but it's functional and has the username in the URL. So this page is it can be bookmarked, and you can enter the application through one of these links. So the explore page remains a placeholder at this point. So in chapter 6, you are going to solidify your work with the backend. So chapter 5 was the first attempt. It sent requests and then rendered the responses. In chapter 6, you are going to build a client wrapper class that will be the point where the entire application goes to when it needs to get data from the backend or send data to the backend. So you're going to build a JavaScript class that will encapsulate everything that needs to do with interfacing with backend. So as part of this, one of the aspects that this class will handle is pagination. So here now at the end of the list, this list is limited. It doesn't include every post. So when the backend says that there are more, then the application will allow you to request the extra content and get information in pages. The explore page now is also rendered, and in case it isn't clear, feed is the list of posts from users that you're following, and explore shows everything, and this is supposedly where you will go to find new users to follow, right? So this one includes everything that is in the system from all users, and you can also paginate this one in the same way. At all times, code reusability is taken into full consideration. So all these features that you see that apply to feed and explore, they are written only once. They don't exist duplicated. So you are going to learn how to make efficient use of components for specifically to reuse all the logic that you build. So moving on to chapter 7. Chapter 7 is dedicated to working with forms, and specifically with form validation. So this is the in preparation for authentication, which comes next. But in this chapter 7, you are going to learn how to work with web forms. So as you recall, there was a /login page that used to be a placeholder. it isn't a placeholder anymore. So this is a real form that that you can submit, and it has full validation. Um, there's also a second form that you're going to build in this chapter for registering a new user, which is also fully validated. So you're going to learn how to do this, and uh, the idea of validating is usually a concerted effort between the client and the server. Some things are validated at the server. A few things make more sense to validate in the client. So you're going to learn how to combine validation efforts from the server and the client to get the best result for the user, the most usable web form. So this registration page is functional. The login page is not functional yet. The authentication comes in the next chapter. But registration is now functional. You are going to learn not only how to validate, but also how to execute the form once all the fields are filled out and the form is submitted. So I'm going to go ahead and register myself. I'm going to use a bogus email here and a password, and let's register. And another important feature in this chapter is how to provide feedback after the user performs an action. You can see that I get a green alert indicating that the registration was successful. The alert went away after some time. There was also a close button that you could use to dismiss it before that timeout if you prefer. So this is actually quite tricky to implement. So you are going to learn how to do this type of thing, which is actually useful to provide feedback to the user when they perform an action and they need to know if it worked or didn't. So all of this is chapter 7. So now we are going to move on to chapter 8. So before I do that, you may be wondering how come the backend was working up to now if there was no authentication. So the backend starts in the early chapters. You are going to be given instructions on how to run it in a special mode, which disables authentication, or better said, it assumes that the user number one, the first user, is always authenticated. So up to this point, we were using that mode. So I need to now reconfigure the backend to enable the full authentication support. So I'm just rerunning the backend now with full authentication. So I'm going to move the application to chapter 8. So here we are in chapter 8. If I go to the main page, now I'm rejected and redirected automatically to the login form. This is a standard procedure. If you try to go to a page that is protected, that requires you to be logged in, you don't get an error. You're sent into the login form so that you can log in. So I made a user right before, so I should be able to log in now. So let's see if it works. And there we go. So here I'm logged in. The header now has this little drop down that has an icon. The icon depends on the email address. If you have an icon registered in the Gravatar service, then it's going to show here. If not, it's going to be a geometric design that's different for every email. You have a link that sends you to your profile page. The profile page used to be a placeholder, but now it shows a little bit of information. But anyway, this is now working with full authentication. This user is brand new. It didn't write. I didn't write any blog posts. I'm not following anyone. there's actually nothing in my feed. So this is an example where when there's nothing to render, instead of getting an empty page, you get a note so that you know that that there's nothing. So this is chapter 8. So now we are going to go into chapter 9. Chapter 9 is a chapter where a variety of application features are implemented. So here the idea is to reinforce everything that you've learned so far by completing this application, or taking it almost to the complete version. For example, you're going to learn how to write a post. This didn't exist before. So now if you're an explorer, you can see the list of posts like before, but on the feed page, on top of the list of posts, you get a form, a little form, where you can write something. There you go. So I wrote my my first blog post. If I go to the explore page, now I see this in the list. In addition, when you go to a user page, now you get the option to follow. In the feed, I can see my blog post and the ones from the user that I just followed. So I can pick, let's pick someone else. I can follow one more. Here I'm also using these alerts. I dismissed that one manually. So now I'm seeing posts from these two users. And as I mentioned before, the contents are nonsense because these are randomized. So the backend has an option to generate some data that is useful when you develop, so that you have some data and you don't have to do it by hand. So these are all random nonsense words. So chapter 10. Chapter 10 doesn't have any visual changes in the application, but it's dedicated to performance. So React applications, when they're small, are usually fine, but when they start to grow, it's very common that they start to be slow. That they render so many things so often that that the browser starts to become laggy. So this is a very important topic that is not that well explained in documentation or other tutorials. So there's a chapter, this chapter is dedicated to this, and you are going to learn a number of ways to optimize the performance using a technique called memoization, and also how to avoid certain problems. For example, a very common problem that occurs in many applications is that they end up creating a render loop where the application it's constantly rendering, and each render changes something that requires a new render, and that never ends. So you're going to learn techniques about how to identify these problems and how to address them, also by using memoization techniques. Chapter 11 is dedicated to automated testing. So there's nothing to see here in the application, but you are going to learn how to write tests. And here I start by showing you how to write a simple test, how to test this, which is a single component. So how to test the component that renders a post. But then I start increasing the complexity of the test, and you will also see how you can test the alerts that show here at the top. So I created a set of tests for that to make sure that that works. And finally, also how to log in and log out of the application, which is something that a lot of people don't do because they consider it to be too hard. So we're going to work on that, and we're going to go one step at a time and show you how you can create tests for all these things that at first sight you will think, how can you do something that depends so much on interaction with a real user? And then finally, the last chapter, chapter 12, also doesn't have any differences visually. Chapter 12 is dedicated to working with the production build of your React application. So up to this point, all the work was done on the development build. So we were using the development build of React. The production build is much more efficient, and there are some things that you can do with it. So you will learn how to run the production build on your own computer, and then how to deploy it for actual production use. So this is the complete course. So I hope this helps you decide if this is a journey that you would like to take. And if you do, I look forward to see you when you begin with the course. So thank you so much.